Good morning, distinguished leaders and guests. My name is Mark Gooch from the U.S. and currently serve as the co-chair of the Health Information Systems and Technology Work Group under the COVID Steering Committee. I am joined today with my esteemed colleagues to present and demonstrate potential medical capabilities adoption of an available system. This presentation will include slides, a short video, and a real-time demonstration. We believe after seeing this presentation, not only does this capability provide an adoptable platform, but adheres to the principles of a force multiplier and NATO planning and operations at the first responder level through levels of care of patient movement, evacuation, and treatment, but also provides critical planning data information at the headquarters level and above. Next slide. Most nations still use paper medical records in the operational theater. This method poses a high risk of lost medical information. Without the treatment histories, continuity of care is degraded, and medical records may never reach the home nation. Next slide. Problem space. On the battlefield, during evac, and in medical treatment, our goal is NATO-wide end-to-end digital interoperability across the care continuum. Next slide. Our goals with the OpenAHLTA demonstration and health information data exploration. Inform and demonstrate OpenAHLTA's interoperability between multiple countries hosting OpenAHLTA as their potential theater electronic healthcare record. As a force multiplier, provides mission critical operational data to units that comprise the NATO integrated core, NATO core data framework, and NATO medical capabilities. Demonstrate multinational interoperability through the transfer of patient treatment records from the theater back into the patient's national electronic healthcare record. And finally, the exploration and demonstration of health informatics data and standards. Next slide. What is OpenAHLTA? OpenAHLTA is an open source electronic healthcare record based on the AHLTA Theater version, which is used by the U.S. Armed Forces. It is field tested and battle proven. It performs in a low and no-com environment. It manages immunization for force readiness, captures, monitors, and reports on infectious disease outbreaks, i.e. the COVID-19 pandemic. It currently features and has been modified to accept Dutch, Spanish, German, French, and English languages. It uses the latest SNOMED CT and ICD codes, our medical standards terminology language, which allows for the interoperability and semantic interoperability of the information being passed and parsed to various care scenarios. Provides both outpatient and inpatient encounter data. The functionalities include immunization tracking, medication, radiology, labs, full pharmacy, allergy and medical interaction checking, bed management, vitals tracking, kiosk scheduling, and check-ins. It's a small footprint, easily deployable, and no licensing required. Next slide. The CWIX 2020 test scenario we'll talk about, going from top to bottom, is all theater facilities can treat an injured allied soldier and their medical records is sent to their national system. My esteemed colleague and the lead for CWIX 2020, Mr. Martin Goose, will talk about this in detail when we talk about the horizontal of passing of information from point of injury through the multiple roles that you'll see here and up to where Mr. Daniel Nopin will talk and Rytis will talk about painting the picture both vertically at the command structure and diagonally to paint that common operating picture that allows commanders and those entrusted to the care and safety of troops to be able to manage and pre-position and pre-plan activities and react to more real-time information exchange. You'll see in the demonstration that NATO receives bed status reports and infectious disease reports in real time. The medical records travel with the soldier through all levels of care, including air evac. NATO does not store the medical records. They are forwarded directly to the soldier's home nation. Next slide. We will watch a simple video demonstration of this capability, followed by a few series of slides that Mr. Goose will set up to talk about, and then we'll go into a live demonstration, and then finally we'll close the session.
Now that we have the encounter documented, we're going to save it onto an NFC tag, which we have right here. So let's go to patients. We'll select our patient. We'll select share via NFC. We can do device-to-device NFC communication, but today we're going to be writing to the tag. So we're going to hit tag. We'll lift up the phone. We'll take our tag. We'll stick it to the bottom. And as you can see, it's been successfully written to the tag. scenario for this video will be the medevac arrives and extracts the unconscious patient. While en route to the Kandahar medical unit, the in-flight medic reads the tag and documents a new encounter with updated vitals, fluids, treatment, and medications, and then uploads the patient's information to the Kandahar med unit so the trauma team can prepare the equipment and room for surgery. So to begin, we're going to sign in as our in-flight medic. We'll enter her PIN, hit login. We're going to take our tag that we used to save Martin Lopez's data to, stick it at the back of the phone. As you can see, it has read the tag, and we have our patient Martin Lopez and the one encounter that came with him. We'll accept. From there, we'll go into patients. We'll click on Martin Lopez. We'll set him as the current patient. As you can see, we have the other encounter that we documented. So we have his 3 injuries. From here, we're going to send the data over to the Kandahar med unit, which we're already configured to talk to. So we'll go over to patients. We'll hit upload patient data. And we'll see it's been successfully uploaded to the Kandahar med unit. So then from here, since the encounter has been sent over to the Kandahar med unit into their OpenAHLTA instance, they can now view all the details from the point of injury to the in-flight encounter. They can add their own diagnosis and treatments.
Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. As you could see in the video, the FirstResponder app allows medics to quickly document injuries and care at the time of treatment on the battlefield. It sends medical data from the front lines to the trauma center, and it makes patient information reach the trauma center before the patient does. It transfers the patient's medical record encrypted over the cellular network to an OpenAHLTA server, where the treatment record is imported into an existing electronic health record. It can transfer the patient's medical record to an NFC tag, which can travel with the patient to the next level of care. And it can transfer the patient's medical record from one Android phone to another Android phone. Next slide, please. We are now at the level of the point of injury where the first treatment starts. Documentation of injuries and given care is sent electronically ahead to the treatment facility the injured soldier is taken to, and all other facilities that are a part of the medical chain. The picture from the FirstResponder app is sent to OpenAHLTA. Next slide, please. The message from the FirstResponder app is received by OpenAHLTA and imported. Next slide, please. The message that was imported from the FirstResponder app becomes a document that is a part of the electronic health record. Next slide, please. The injured soldier is admitted to the treatment facility for further care and assigned a bed number. Next slide, please. OpenAHLTA sends out a message to the patient evacuation coordination cell. Next slide, please. At the common operational picture, it is visualized that the treatment facility has 1 bed less available. Next slide, please. Further care given to stabilize the injured soldier in order to evacuate to the next level of care is documented in OpenAHLTA. Next slide, please. The injured soldier is then discharged from the treatment facility. Next slide, please. And when the discharge is confirmed, next slide, please. OpenAHLTA sends out a message to the patient evacuation coordination cell. Next slide, please. At the common operational picture, it is now visualized that the treatment facility has the maximum bed capacity again. Next slide, please. This paints the medical picture from roll 1 through roll 4, sending electronic treatment records and receiving summary care records. This is what we consider the horizontal data flow, based upon we are able to send out, for example, medical management information and command and control messages. I will now turn over to Mr. Daniel Noppen, who is going to present on the NATO medical capability. Over to you, Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Martin. So indeed, I will speak about the NATO capability. And if you first look at the bottom right corner, you can see that horizontal and vertical data flow that we spoke about. So where the horizontal data flow is really about that data going from the point of injury to the MTFs and then down to the home nation. The vertical data flow is the data going up to the PEC, the Patient Evacuation Coordination Cell, and the headquarters. So our capability is currently under development, and it really supports the command and control system. It contains planning, management, health surveillance, intel, and trauma registry capabilities. And again, it really supports that vertical information stream. Now, all findings that we have at CWIX will feed into the ESS medical capability. This is the long-term program within NATO for the development of a medical capability. Our work is sponsored by the ACT Med branch, and at CWIX, the participation is led by the NCI agency. Next slide. So at CWIX 2020, we focus on 3 domains. These are patient tracking, patient regulating, and syndromic surveillance. So if we talk about patient tracking, this is really about preventing to lose patients, so to not know where they are. This was a not uncommon issue in ISAF and Resolute support. Also, it really gives you a good insight in the patient flow, which then aids the capacity and capability planning. Patient regulating is really about improving the planning and execution of medical evacuations. And syndromic surveillance is really about giving NATO that early detection capability for disease outbreaks in order to control such outbreaks which have major disruptions to operations. What we want to do really is to provide that theater-wide patient tracking capability to support both the Medivac and TechEvac planning process. At CWIX 2020, the focus was on the TechEvacs. And lastly, to process confirmed disease cases and then to show the outbreaks on the COP. Next slide. So we have 2 screenshots here of the capability. This shows the patient tracking overview. These are all the admissions and discharges of the patients at the MTFs as reported by the MTFs and as collected by the PEC. Next slide. And this slide shows the outbreaks on the common operational pictures as colored rings. So each ring here depicts an outbreak. This concludes my slides. I want to hand over to Rytis, who will talk about the diagonal data flow, which is the data going to the other communities. Over to Rytis.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm going to be presenting NATO Integration Core. What is NATO Integration Core in short? Well, it is known as INCORE, and it is a field capability that is taken as a success story from Afghanistan, where it is deployed since 2013. And as part of Resolute support mission, successfully unified the common operational picture and became recognized as a mission critical capability. INCORE is agile mission configurable middleware system. What does it mean? Well, it is an enabler. It is used to build reliable, secure, and cost-effective integration cases for a command and control lifecycle of a theater. Effectively, it acts as a universal interface library to share the information across the mission lifecycle, to translate and transform the formats, and it allows the mission to move from the system-centric towards the data-centric data management by aggregating, modeling, and disseminating all of the mission data. Next slide, please. INCORE connects every community of interest by accumulating the information, translating it, and disseminate it as the payload back to the mission command and control lifecycle. INCORE is not a prototype capability. It is already fielded and is mission critical in operations. It promotes interoperability across the theater by connecting the critical points of data. Furthermore, it is mission configurable. For example, in Afghanistan, out of over 100 integration cases, all of which were configured in theater. And it is recognized for automating the number of work processes, and it reduced the strain on the human resources. Furthermore, since 2020, INCORE became part of a NATO software tool. Next slide, please. INCORE in CWIX effectively acts as the data-centric transformation API by connecting most of the communities of interest, as shown in the slide right here. It unifies the focus areas by connecting the data sources and extracting the medical information from the authoritative data source, such as US OpenAHLTA or NATO Medics, and later disseminating it back to the joint common operational picture, effectively acting as a message broker. InCore being agile and flexible application, it successfully unifies and augments the core elements for the commanders in the time of need. For example, the alert messages of a patient evacuation that are later disseminated to the HQ and the lower echelons as part of a NATO core data framework, or so-called data lake infrastructure. And with this, I'd like to pass the presentation to my colleague, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rytis. Some key takeaways before we walk into the demonstration and really show the power of what we're talking about, interoperability standards and that medical mesh ecosystem that allows us to really fundamentally change and inject new capability that springboards us into the future of that. When combined with NATO capabilities, OpenAHLTA delivers a force multiplying effect to enhance medical decision support and data interoperability throughout the mission, command, and control lifecycle. It saves lives and improves quality of care. It provides a data-centric approach to mission-critical operational data, both horizontally, vertically, and across communities of interest. The digital medical record travels with the soldier and can precede their arrival through all levels of care, including air evac. Provides the ability to exchange patient data securely across multiple stages of care. The ICD-10 code standards removes the language barriers to have a common terminology for all nations without a loss of information. Next slide. I'd like to thank the CWIX participating nations and all those involved in the stewardship of that from the HISWG, the Netherlands, Belgium, the United States, and NATO. Thank you for putting so much time and effort into this and for the guidance and support from all nations involved with this medical capability and planning demonstration that I will turn over to Martin, and he will walk through with our scenarios and show you just the power of and the transformational nature of this. That we could not only use in NATO, but when we look at NATO operations and humanitarian support functionality, we'll talk about the platform and its use is there as it's pliable enough to fit those response activities as well. Thank you. Martin, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So for the first part of our demonstration, we are going to treat a wounded soldier at the point of injury. And the medic who is going to be the first responder has a smartphone with him and the first responder app installed on it. We are going to use the first responder app. I'm going over to patients. I'm going to add a new patient. Called scenario 1 without a middle name. The gender is going to be male. Social security number is going to be date of birth, the 7th of July. (1997). And the patient is from the country Belgium. It's a Belgian soldier. So now that I've entered these the first data, I'm going to save the patient. The patient has been successfully saved. I'm going to select the patient and set the patient as the current patient. I'm going to click on Encounter. I'm going to add a counter to this patient. This patient has no allergies. The exposure is unknown at the moment. And I'm going to Injury. There's no tourniquet applied. Injury type case is going to be a battle injury. The injury type is going to be a wound. The specific problem is going to be a gunshot. Notice how the first responder app comes up with a message when you select gunshot. It mentions apply direct pressure to the wound immediately, no morphine of chest, head injury, or respiratory issues. So it comes with decision support as well. I'm going to click OK. For severity, I'm going to choose through and through. I'm going to go over to the picture where I indicate the location of the bullet wound. It's going to be the left shoulder. The left shoulder as well. The cause of the injury is a gunshot wound. And at this point, I'm going to save the injury case. Going over to vitals. We're not going to register a pain level at this moment. The patient is alert. Patient's pulse is 112. Respiration is 15. And at this moment, I'm not going to add any additional vitals. So I'm clicking add vitals for those I've registered so far. You can see the pulse of 112 and respiration of 15. Going over to treatment. The airway is intact. There are no problems breathing. For circulation, we are going to apply a pressure dressing. And I'm going over to meds and fluids. At this point, I'm not going to give any meds and fluids. Going over to the Glasgow Coma Scale. Since this patient does not have a head injury, I'm not going to do the Glasgow exam, but I'm going over to Safe Encounter. And as you can see now, the FirstResponder app shows the SOAP node, which states the name and age of the patient, the objectives like the gunshot to anterior, applicable ICD-10 code, and suggestion for the plan. You also see the picture where the injury is indicated on the left shoulder. So I'm going to sign and save this encounter. And I'm finished with the registration at the point of injury. So what I want to do now is send this encounter over to a NFC tag so it can travel with the patient to the casualty collecting point. Going to click on patients. I'm going to select scenario 1 again. I want to share via NFC. I'm going to choose that I'm going to share via NFC tag. The phone starts reading the NFC tag once I hold it against it. And the result of the share is successful. So I'm finished on this FirstResponder phone and sent the patient data and the encounter over to the NFC tag. Now I'm going to use a second NFC, second FirstResponder phone that is also connected to my laptop. So the second phone is also running the FirstResponder app. I'm going to use it together with the NFC tag to import the patient encounter. I'm going to accept. As you can see, this phone now has a scenario 1 patient. I will set this patient as a current patient. Click on Encounter. And we can now see that on the date of today, the 10th of July, there was registered an encounter. I'm going to select it And this is actually the patient we registered on the first phone with the gunshot wound. So now I'm going to add a second encounter to this patient. This patient still has no allergies. The exposure is still friendly. Injury, in regards to injury, no tourniquet. The injury type is a battle injury. The injury type case is a battle injury. The injury type is a wound. Specific problem is a gunshot. Again, the first responder app pops up the alert message about treating a gunshot wound. The severity is through and through. I'm going to indicate the location of the gunshot. The cause of the injury is a gunshot wound. This time on the second phone, I'm also going to take a picture of the gunshot wound. I'm going to select camera. Now I'm going to save the injury case. The injury is saved. Click vitals. At this point, we are going to record the pain level, which is 6. Patient is still alert. Pulse is a little bit higher, 120. Aspiration is also a little bit higher, we make this 18. The oxygen saturation is 98%. I'm going to add these vitals. Going over to treatment, the airway is intact. No problems breathing. And for circulation, we still have the pressure dressing. Going over to meds and fluid. We are going to give some fluid, 500 milliliters. Add the fluid. Going to give some medication by IV. Some analgesic. And we choose 10 milligrams of morphine. I'm going to add the medication. And going over to the Glasgow Coma Scale, which again we are not going to register since this patient does not have a head wound. I'm going to save the encounter. It's presented with the SOAP message. And as you can see, this time we gave some fluid and some medication. And also we added a picture of the injury, and we have the location of the bullet wound on the patient. So I'm going to sign and save. And the second encounter is registered on the first responder. Now what I want to do is send over this encounter to the Role 1 medical facility. I'm going not to choose by NFC, but I'm going to send it. I'm going to have a look at the application settings where I can enter service configurations. At this moment, it's actually selected the US Role 2, but we are going to send it to the Dutch Role 1. But again, I'm going over to patients. I'm going to select scenario 1, and I am going to upload the patient data. The patient data has been successfully uploaded. So from this point, I'm going to switch over to the OpenAHLTA instance I've running, which is simulating the Dutch roll 1. In OpenAHLTA, I'm going to the data manager. And it notifies me that there are incoming messages to process. So I'm going to click yes. It's retrieving the messages. And as you can see, this is the patient scenario 1, which we registered on the OpenAHLTA phone earlier. The import is complete, and I'm going to click OK. I'm going to documents. And I can see 2 encounters. One encounter which was registered on the FirstResponder phone, where we only registered a few vitals, and the second encounter which was registered on the second FirstResponder phone, where we actually added some more vitals and added some fluid and some medication. We can see the picture of the point of injury, the point of the gunshot wound. And we can see the image that was taken of the patient with the gunshot wound. So this is all good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make this patient an inpatient patient. So I'm going to do an admission. This is the patient scenario 1, and the admission type is transfer from a non-US military hospital. And from patient primary service, I'm going to select the setup of my Dutch roll 1, which is a medical ICU and has 2 beds available. And I'm going to assign bed number 1 to this patient, and I'm going to administer an admission diagnosis. For the cause or the admission diagnosis, at this point we are going to select the accidental discharge from unspecified firearms or a gun. I'm going to click OK. And the patient was assigned to bed number 1 in the Dutch roll 1. What I want to do now is do some extra treatment on the patient. So we are going to monitor the vitals, and we are giving the patient some additional medication, and then prepare the patient for the evacuation from the Dutch roll 1 to the US roll 2. So I'm going to inpatient orders. I'm going to add a new order. And the order type is vital signs that are going to be monitored every 15 minutes. I'm clicking submit. And the second order is a medications order. We are going to choose a medication for calming the patient. Selecting submit. And we have the 2 orders. So I've registered the injury at the point of injury using the FirstResponder app, imported it into OpenAHLTA and admitted the patient to the Dutch roll 1. At this point, we are going to switch to Daniel Noppen, who's going to show the medical capability. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Martin. So we're looking at the screen that the PEC, the Patient Evacuation Coordination Cell, would normally see. So the first thing I'll do is refresh this page. As we can see, there is 2 messages from today. The first message is actually containing the event that indicates that the patient was admitted, which is this message, and the other message actually contains the new bed count. And what we'll do is we'll switch first to this page, and we're going to look at the MTF, which is this one, and I'll also do a refresh. And what we can see here is that from the 2 beds, only 1 is available, and this is exactly according to what Martin had been doing. And then we're going to switch over to the patient tracking page. I'm also going to do a refresh. And right there at the top, we can see the last event. This is the patient, and its current status is showing as admitted at Talsi today. And currently, we just have the 1 message for the patient. Lastly, I will show the COP viewer that we're using. And as we can see here, there is Talsi depicted on the map. This is the actual location of the MTF. And it also depicts here that of the 2 beds, only 1 is available. That is what the label shows. And from here, we go back over to Martin.
So we finished treating the patient at the roll 1. We are going to discharge this patient now for the evacuation to the roll 2. I'm going to click on Add Note. This is going to be a discharge summary. I'm clicking on SO. This is going to be a new note. Evacuation. The note title is going to be Patient Movement Request. The note is complete. And I'm going to disposition the patient. I'm going to choose evacuation. And I'm going to sign it. I'm going to click the discharge and confirm the discharge as my password and click OK. Now, the moment that I've discharged the patient from the Dutch roll 1, the information is sent to the US roll 2, and the data that I transmitted from my OpenAHLTA instance can be picked up from the US OpenAHLTA instance. Then I'm going to hand over to Scott, who's going to present a part of the US roll 2. Over to you, Scott.
Okay. All right, thank you, Martin. And so now I've switched over to the US roll 2, and I've launched OpenAHLTA. So I'll go over and go to the data manager. And I can see that I have incoming messages from the patient that was just evacuated from the Netherlands roll 1. I'll go ahead and click yes to import. And we can see that this patient is now being imported. Import is now complete. I'll switch over to the documents module to view all the encounters that have been documented. So I can see all these encounters, the initial encounter, the encounter from the second phone, including the picture, and then the inpatient treatment that the patient received at the Netherlands Role 1. Now I'll hand it over to Daniel.
So we are back at the PEC. I'm going to refresh this page. And we can see that a few messages came in, 3 to be exact. So as before, we have a message right here, which is the bed count. We have the discharge message. And we have a movement request that also came in. So again, I'm going to refresh this page. So the current bed count is 1 out of 2 available. And when I do a refresh, it's back 2 at 2. I'm going to refresh the patient tracking overview. And as you can see right here, the patient is now shown as discharged. And if I expand, I can actually see the 2 messages that came in for this patient. So this is the admitted message from before, and this is the discharge message. Lastly, if we look at the cup, we can also see that the bed count for Talsi is back for at 2 at 2. And now over to Martin.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So at the COP, we could see that the bed levels went back to 2 out of 2. So all beds are available again. And at the moment of the discharge, actually the patient message was sent from the Role 1 to all the other medical facilities, including the US Role 3, where the patient is going to be evacuated to. So I'm at this moment sitting in the Dutch Role 1 in the Netherlands, registered the patient encounters and did some medical administration in OpenAHLTA. We sent out the command and control messages to the medical capability, like the bed status report and the patient movement request. And we are going to switch to the US Medical Role 3, which is actually in the US at the moment of this demonstration. Over to you, Scott.
And so now we've switched over to the US Role 3. And what I do is expand tools, select data manager, and then we can see we have incoming messages. I'll go ahead and click yes to import the messages. Import is complete. Now I'll switch over to the documents module, where we can see all the encounters that have been documented for this patient so far. And from here, we can admit them as an inpatient and perform some more treatment. But at this point, what we'll do is we'll switch over to my colleague Christoph, and he is at the Belgium Role 4, which is essentially the Belgium National Health System, so that we can see when the patient is evacuated back to their home country, that all their medical records that were documented in the field are now in their national system. Christoph, I hand it over to you.
Lieutenant Christoph Moga speaking here from Belgium. So what you can see here is my screen from my OpenAHLTA instance in Belgium, here with me at the military hospital in Brussels. So from the moment on, the patient was sent to the first OpenAHLTA server, so the Role 1. It directly detected it was a Belgian patient and shared it with all known Belgian instances. So you can see on my screen, if I go to Tools and Data Manager, I also have a pop-up saying that there is some new information for me. So I click on Yes. And as you can see, it's the patient scenario 1, which is coming into my system. So now if I click on Documents, I indeed have all the different visits and all the different encounters of the patient. And if I scroll on them, I can see all the information which was added in by the first person who handled the patient and took a picture. And I have all the information. This is, of course, a very big advantage because if we lost track of the patient as a Belgian nation, we can know via our role 4 by having this information directly sent over that the patient is being taken care of by Dutch people and then by US role 2. So we know where the patient is. This gives us the opportunity to also fill in some information and help out the role 2, which has our patient, in order to give them the opportunity to give him better medical care. So to do this, we can export a summary care record in which we add some information. If the other nation is not using OpenAHLTA, we can also export it as a PDF file and send it by other means to the role 2 or 3, which is handling the patient.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, as we walk through and demonstrate the point of injury that Martin started off with, the first responder app, through the various roles of care, the documentation, and the coding necessary for that semantics that eventually ends up into the role 4, you'll see the speed and quickness of the activities that's going on, and how fast and rapid. When we talk about the patient movement requests, we talk about the information getting to the right people at the right time, safely and securely, to allow and effect a change in the positive manner. This would conclude a walkthrough from the point of injury to role 4. The second aspect we talked about in the OpenAHLTA's availability would be through syndromic and surveillance monitoring. From here, we're going to look at an outbreak, and I will pass it on to Daniel, who will show what that looks like and registered as a graphic overlay and the messages associated with the syndromic and surveillance monitoring aspects of OpenAHLTA. Daniel, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So we are back here at the NATO medical system, and the entity that will be using the system currently is the NATO Medical Analysis Center. So I will show 2 screens. First is this screen that we have up here. So what we can see here, these are the different MTFs, and we're going to zoom in on the Kuldiga, and the current count for Romeo, which is confirmed COVID cases, is currently set at 8. And if we switch over to the COP viewer, what we can see here, each blue icon is an MTF, and this colored circle currently indicates that at this MTF there is a severe outbreak. And if we click on it, we can see case count being 8 currently. Now over to Martin.
Thank you, Daniel. We are at the level of the role 2, Netherlands role 2 in Kuldiga. What we are going to do is enter a patient for the disease scenario. I'm going to register a new patient called VIP demo. Patient has a non-US ID. The response ID is the same. The gender is going to be a male. The country is going to be Netherlands. Okay. Now, if the patient VIP demo is still selected, I'm going to register a new visit. And the visit reason is going to be a fever. I'm going to encounter summary. Enter AP. Level of diagnosis, I'm going to search for COVID. And it's actually showing the WHO emergency ICD-10 code, which we implemented for the CWIX scenario. I'm going to choose the COVID-19 virus identified. I'm going to click this position. I'm going to choose fever, and the cause of the illness is going to be a non-battle illness. I'm going to sign this position. And once I've signed this position, OpenAHLTA is sending out a sensor message to the medical capability. I'm going to hand over to Daniel again. Over to you, Daniel.
Okay, thank you, Martin. So we are back here at the NATO medical capability. The entity still being the NATO Medical Analysis Center. And the first thing I will do is refresh this page. And what we can see here is the last message is a sensor message. This is a syndromic surveillance message. It has been received from Coldiga. And if I go back to the page that shows the MTFs, we can see the count currently being at 8 for Romeo at Coldiga. This is COVID confirmed. I will refresh the page. And we can see the count went up from 8 to 9. I will go back to the CUP viewer. And we can see right away that at Coldiga, there is now a very severe outbreak. So we went over that threshold and the outbreak is now very severe. That concludes this part. Back to Martin.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. That concluded the outbreak scenario. Before we are going to close our demonstration, we are going to switch over to Scott, who is going to show a little bit about the hardware that we use for running all our OpenAHLTA instances. Over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Martin. So here we have the UTSP case, what we call Unified Theater Server Platform. Basically, it's a server container and a box. What we have is this particular one is configured with 10 slots, and each slot you can plug in a credit card sized server. Here we have 2 of them, and they can have a max of 16 gigs each and 1 terabyte of storage. We are running 5 VMs across these 2, and the network connectors in the back, basically it has a managed switch. Each card gets 3 network cards, or 3 NICs. And this particular one, it's difficult to see, but this particular one has 2 10 gig SFP ports, and I have those configured on a pfSense firewall that we're running. One is the WAN, and then others are for the management network, a VPN network, and I'm running 3 VLANs. You can also get the case configured with 10 1 gig Ethernet ports as well. But this particular one, we have 2 10 gig SFP ports, and I have the SFP to Ethernet adapters in here right now, and that's how I'm able to connect mine up to just a regular Ethernet copper switch, which is right here. Thank you, Martin, and now back to you.
Yes, thank you, Scott. So we used for our scenario several OpenAHLTA instances, a couple of which are hosted by Scott, like he just demonstrated. On top of that, we have OpenAHLTA instances which are run on a virtual machine, a physical host in the Netherlands, and a physical host in the Belgium military hospital. And that all combined together, we were able to run our CWIX testing scenarios. So what we have demonstrated up till now was use of the FirstResponder app at the point of injury and sending the medical data and the patient data from the FirstResponder app to the medical treatment facility, the role 1, and importing that into OpenAHLTA. Using OpenAHLTA as the military health information system and running the entire use case up to sending the patient data to home nation. And in this case, the patient data was received by Christoph in the Belgian military hospital. Finally, we also showed the outbreak scenario where we used the sensor message, and we were able to exchange the World Health Care Organization's emergency ICD-10 codes, which we implemented during the CWIX scenario. Concluding, we hope that we were able to show you how easy it is to use this system, this open source, and we are able to not only register medical data, but also medical command and control data and medical management information, so that we really are able to use the horizontal data flow, the vertical data flow, and the diagonal data flow, like it was mentioned in the presentation. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to ask the persons on the contact list showing right now. And I thank you very much for being a part of this presentation.